All right, so we all know that processed foods are bad for us. And we've been preaching for quite some time that the old adage of just knowing how many calories a day you need to eat and taking a little bit less to reduce body fat or a little bit more to gain more muscle, that's still the core of that is true. But unlike the old days, it's not that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. We know that processed food calories cause more damage, cause more disease, cause more weight gain than the same amount of calories from healthy food. And so this meta-analysis was done, a study of a bunch of studies to show just how damaging processed foods are. And I wrote a blog, highly recommend you go to optimalhealthsystems.com or douglasdegrant.com and check out the blog. And I want to go over some of the studies just in the last 9 months that have shown how bad processed foods are for you. Okay, so just in the last 9 months, we're talking about a whole range of health issues that are being caused by processed foods that we have total proof of now. 5 different studies published in 2022, including shortening of our lives. Now, the first one talks about reducing physical fitness in kids. Now, this study found that the young kids, ages 3 to 5, and also all the way up to 15 years of age, that consumed ultra processed foods, right? We're talking the French fries, potato chips, anything ultra processed, that they're actually lowered their fitness level. And it was done by the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. The data was analyzed from it, and it was presented at the American Society for Nutrition. And they showed, it was absolutely amazing, that they had poor locomotor skills compared to children who didn't consume highly processed foods. In other words, just being able to be mobile and movement and being able to react properly when it comes to play or anything else. The second study was an increased risk of depression and anxiety. Now, this was a large study done with over 10,000 people, and they studied people that consume the most ultra processed foods, and they had statistically significant increases in adverse mental health symptoms when compared with those who consumed less processed foods. We're talking about depression, mentally unhealthy days, days you just don't feel it and don't get much done, days that are anxiety filled, anxious filled. A lot of it is due to just eating processed food. And this was a really great study. It was published online at Cambridge University, Florida Atlantic University, Schmidt College of Medicine was a collaborator with it. And it's mainly not just because of the nutritional value, but also these ultra processed foods tend to be higher in the synthetic forms of your sugars and your fats, like hydrogenated fats. And they actually make the body crave more of those foods because they're not getting them in the proper form. So nutrient deficiency, which we know causes a huge list of conditions, including cravings, so raising ghrelin levels in the body. And so that was a really interesting study. The third study showed that it caused an increased risk of colorectal cancer in men. Now, this was even a larger study. Over 200,000 people men were in this study. And they showed that the men that consumed the higher amounts of ultra processed foods had a 29% higher risk for developing colorectal cancer when compared to men that didn't consume as many processed foods. That's a huge increased risk just from eating processed foods versus having more salads or more foods, even if they're cooked at close to their natural state. In other words, like a sweet potato or a potato that is baked or broiled, those types of things. And now this study was also done very well. It's at Tufts University and Harvard University, and it was published in the British Medical Journal, so it's peer reviewed. The fourth was an increased risk of dementia in the elderly. Now, this was really a really interesting study because they showed that as you get older, elderly people, if they consumed ultra processed foods, their risk of dementia, their cognitive levels declined, short-term memory. And it was done with over 72,000 residents tracked over a 10-year period of time. And this was published in Neurology just in September of 2022. So we know that the more processed foods you have, and a lot of it's due to the fact that you are blocking the nutrients getting past the blood-brain barrier because of these processed foods, and it's causing that blood sludge, if it would, or high hematocrit in that in the body too. The fifth study was that it increased the risk of premature death. So if none of those other studies relates to you, this one does. This relates to everyone. We all want to live longer, right? And this was from Brazil, and they showed the consumption of ultra-processed foods was associated with more than 10% of all-cause premature preventable deaths. Now, what does that mean? That means that we're going to be able to have 10% more life by consuming foods that are not ultra processed. Now, what's 10%? If you're going to live to be 100, that'd be 10 more years. I mean, that's a lot. People that would wish they had 10 more minutes, so let alone having that amount of extra time. So super important to understand that the processing of the foods is the big culprit, is the big game changer now versus decades ago. When you hear about the people that were on the farms and they lived to be 90, 100, 110 years old, and well, they smoked once in a while, or they did this and that. Well, they ate all their foods at least fresh, and they could get away with a few things. But when every day we're consuming these processed foods, and it's the main thing we're taking into our body, it's adding up and it's causing the damage, instead of just once in a while having something that our kidneys and liver do their job and process out the toxins. So the key is to get away from the processed foods and be able to eat more whole foods in your daily diet. Get away from the carbonation, drink more water, get away from the french fries, have more potatoes. Okay, stay away from the processing of the foods. The further it gets away from its natural state, the worse it is for you. But go to our blog, check out this study. You can click on any one of these. It'll pull up the study itself so that you can read it and look into it in more detail. Like, for example, this one, talking about the colorectal cancer risk in men and women. You can go through them. And then also on the blog, it'll go through and give you some of the suggestions as far as nutrients you can take to help, which foods would be best for you, and so on. So check it out. Remember, stay away from processed foods, especially in the season coming up, and keep chewing, but the healthy whole foods.